I hope this. So yesterday I kind of gave people a preview of what I was going to talk about today, July 4th. And today is July 4th. And on Facebook, I titled my walk 1776, the day that changed the world. So I'm going to read the Constitution, but I'm going to read about, maybe 20 words that I'm going to encompass and talk about today on my walk. And these words are in some ways poetic, because it is it's what we're having to deal with in America today, but they had to deal with this 250 years ago. And that's why they wrote this document, the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their creators with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, there's more to that, and there's a lot more, actually. But we hold these truths self-evident. We hold these truths self-evident. No time in history has a document been written since the Constitution of the United States. And no Constitution has been written since that has had those words with that impacting statement that everybody has a right, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I always go back to certain aspects of the Revolutionary War, and I always reference the letter of George Washington to Martha, and compare George Washington sometimes to Napoleon, just how different, completely different these men were in their. I really believe it's their moral, their moral fiber. You know, their inner core. Who were they really as men? And I don't want to hear anything about the slavery issue, because that just was a part of history. That wasn't necessarily the character of a man. The key is, who was George Washington? And there are several aspects of George Washington that should give you a pause. And one of them is that, and I make references, that he wrote a letter to Martha, and I think it was written during Valley Forge, about, he's distressed about the war. He doesn't know how it's going to go, and he's very concerned. And then toward the end of the letter, he's then mentioning how, when this is all over, he wants to come back to Mount Vernon and redo the kitchen and do things here and there to Mount Vernon. The man was perplexed. He was He was going against the largest navy. We had no navy, barely. We were just a bunch of ragtag patriots that were fed up with the tyranny that was being put upon them. And the course of history would change forever on Earth. I mean change forever on Earth. And yesterday, I was making the story of what would happen if the United States had not been the United States? How would that have changed history? How would that have changed everything that we have, that we had done? How would that have altered the course of history? Which I find very odd, very amazing. 250 years ago, a very odd and abstract document was created. We, the people, we hold these truths self-evident, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, life lived in the pursuit of happiness. Now see, the media and the modern all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Now, who is the Creator? People will say, well, they always will go back to, oh, well, Thomas Jefferson, you know, he was an immoral man, and all these men were just flawed men. Everybody's flawed. We are all flawed. Then they'll say, oh, they were going to get rich and make money and this and that. Most of the signers of the Constitution died a pauper. Died a pauper. They died a pauper. The document that changed the world, that changed the course of the world forever. It doesn't matter if the United States is here or there. One thing that is true, that it was and it is. There are so many people that want to tear down that which is good. That's all they want to do, is tear down that which is good. And those beginning words, we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. That's what everybody should be thinking about. What has the Creator endowed on you? You had an average Ohioan. You had an average, well, not much so much Ohio. I might have stretched that a little bit. But you had men all over the colonies. From New Hampshire to Maine to Massachusetts, to Pennsylvania, to Virginia. All these men with families and hopes and dreams in a new world that was free from the tyranny of England, because England was in big bad trouble with their king. Everything was okay for the aristocracy and the well-to-do. But you had debtor's prison, you had a lot of inconsistencies. But that average guy, when the Declaration was written, it was given to all the people. It was printed and distributed. And your average guy is sitting on his farm in Pennsylvania or in Massachusetts or Connecticut. He's sitting in his farm and he pulls out this document and he's reading it. We hold these truths self-evident, that men are created equal. Now people will say, well, that's high words, Brian, but what about the slaves? Well, that's part of history. And that was a problem when it was written too. And that rectified itself, the Civil War. It had to. It's kind of like a scab. You cut yourself and you think you got it all perfect and you bandaged it, but underneath there's a little speck that's underneath that scab. And until that speck is removed from your skin, it's never going to heal. And slavery was that one issue. It had to be abolished sooner or later. So these farmers are sitting there and thinking, maybe this is something to fight for. Maybe this is something that I'm gonna maybe have to die for. And with little money in his pocket, he joins the army. Then you have George Washington, really untested in battle. Oh, he was a colonel, but now he's going up against seasoned British officers, the Prussians. Fully equipped. Brand new muskets. Brand new shoes. Plenty of ammo. And one battle after another, George Washington lost. One after another, just couldn't get it together. A document that was written in Philadelphia by a group of men that their lives were on the line. They could all have been executed. It's funny. You look at How would have things changed if that fleet landed in Philadelphia instead of Boston? Boston was the hub, in a sense, of commerce, and you had Boston, you had New York, and Philly. The course of history changed. The course of history changed. The sacrifice of countless men died on the battlefield for freedom. For freedom. Thomas Jefferson once said that if you sacrifice any freedom for security, you don't deserve either. And they were facing that also 250 years ago. They wanted security, but they didn't sacrifice liberty. And they went to war for liberty. They went to war to stop the tyranny. I always talk about the divine intervention of God and why it's so important that we don't forget God, which a lot of people are doing, and how dangerous that can be to reject what has God given us. And it's important that we remember these things. We remember what the sacrifices were. The Patriots, the Continental Army, sitting on the banks of the Hudson, getting ready to travel, not the Hudson, can't think of the river, but sitting on the coast or on the shore of the river to transfer over into Trenton. Dead of winter, having to transport all your equipment, all your guns, your ammo, everybody. While the enemy was sleeping. And then they wake, and it was a victory for George Washington. A small victory, but a victory. All the logistics. I'm always amazed by the logistics. All the small things that had to come together for it to work. But the most important battle I always look at is the battle at Yorktown that ended the war. All the logistics that had to come together for that to work. The letter that had to be written to the French fleet that was in the Caribbean. for them to get that letter, number one, to know that they got it, the time frame in which it had to go. I was talking about that on Saturday, that they had to write this letter to make sure the fleet was, the British or the French fleet was in Chesapeake Bay, and that it had to be there at a certain time. So all this had to play together. All these letters, all this communication had to take over a period of months. They didn't have cell phones. They didn't have telegraphs. They didn't have airplanes. They didn't have pigeon birds. Now that I don't know. They might have had pigeon birds. I don't know. But a letter had to be written. It had to be taken all the way from the Americas down to the Caribbean without any problems. And the admiral, the commander of the fleet, the French fleet there, had to get that and then sail all his ships up the coast of America and hit the Chesapeake Bay to stop the British from retreating. Little things, guys. Little things. 1776. You got little things. You got Audie Murphy battling tanks, Germans, killing 150 Germans on a burning tank. You have Desmond Doss saving soldiers off the Hackshaw Ridge. Just one more, Lord, he said. Just one more. Save me one more. You have the Battle of the Bulge at Bastogne. The Germans send a letter to the commander to surrender. And what did he say? Nuts. Simple words, nuts. Germans read that and who is this American? What is he saying? Nuts. That's the psychic of America. That's who we are. We're Germans. We're French. We're Italians. And in World War II, we all came together. The French, the Italians, Italian Americans, German Americans, Japanese Americans. We all came together. Because we had these certain words. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable. We hold these truths self-evident, that man are created equal. And they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Among men. Can't take the Creator out of the Constitution, people. They want to very badly. They want to take the Creator out of the Constitution. But it will never, you never can take it out. Because it is the foundation. That's why when the German commander got the letter back, he goes nuts. Because we were fighting a different type of soldier. Then you can go back to World War I. Alvin York, conscientious objector, that goes into the army anyways. He captured over 200 Germans single-handedly. Then you have George Patton. One thing after another. One thing after another. Then you have the pioneers. I love this story. I love this story so much because it really tells the fortitude and the determination of free people, given a chance, can do anything. Can literally do anything. All of a sudden in America, in the eastern states, you have all pent-up energy. And the government is going to give away all this land. All you have to do is settle on it and make it prosper. And so they're going to give away land. So people would travel out into the west and they would stake out a land, hoping that they would get it. But there was one problem. You all had to start at the same time and run and then claim it. And so hundreds of thousands of Americans all over America, all over the world really, came to St. Louis. They disembarked from ships, from paddle wheel boats, off of trains. They all settled in St. Louis. And then they got in their wagon trains and they headed for the debarkation zone. A huge train, a big line of wagons, of families, of hopes and dreams. I just find it so amazing. You had hundreds of thousands of wagons with children, with men and women, farmers, hoping, man, I can just get to that land. I can fertile the land. I could dig the land, and I could farm it, and I would have my crops. I would build my house. I would raise my family. It's all a dream. All you have to do is give somebody a dream, and that's what it took. Just a dream, a hope. And you have thousands of these wagons ready. And then all of a sudden, they fire. And you have this wall of wagons heading west. Thousands of them. For the growth of a nation. Some made it, some didn't. Some would. There was a video. Actually, it's on. I was watching it a couple of weeks ago about a guy who was in Utah, and he was going through the Oregon Trail, and he was seen, and in the mud, in this hardened mud, you could see the wagon wheels ruts that are engraved into the mud. And it had to be more than just one wagon. It had to be hundreds of them to create that impression into the ground. They all wanted to go. They all wanted to fulfill that dream. That is the dream of America. That's the dream. You know, we will go through hard times. We went through hard times, and in 1865, 1860, Those were very hard times for America. A lot of people wondered if our short 100 years would make it. By 1876, would we still be a nation? But what would the world have been like without the United States? Where would we be? Well, I told you yesterday, if you watch yesterday's video, I told you where the world would be. Be a completely different place. Completely different place. It would be so night and day, you wouldn't even recognize America. St. Louis, Kansas, all those cities might not have been. The French wouldn't have gone to war with the Americans, or go to war with the Continental Army. The French would have probably stayed in America, maybe. They had New Orleans. They might have gone all the way up to Mississippi and controlled the whole middle of America. And how would that have panned out over years? And the Spaniards would have had the West Coast. The world would have changed completely. But after the war, something miraculously happened. Probably the first time in history that this had happened. You had a man that was the supreme commander of his troops. He was the absolute general of the war. He goes and meets all of his soldiers, all of his officers, and in a tearful goodbye, he resigns his commission. You're saying, what do you mean, Brian, the first time in history? People always say that absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yes, that's true. If you're a man with no conscience, if you're a man with no morals, George Washington was just that man. Absolute power did not corrupt absolutely with George Washington. Was he a flawed man? Oh, sure, he's flawed. Everybody's flawed. I'm flawed. I don't care who you are, you're flawed. And some are evil. But he came to his officers and he said, and I don't know if these are exact his words, but, give me some liberty here. Or give me some death. I get it. But he basically said, guys, I'm going back to Mount Vernon. I've done what I've been instructed to do. I've led the Continental Army. I've been victorious against the largest nation on earth. It was costly for Britain, guys. Let's make this very clear. They were in financial trouble with to have 500 ships is costly. And a lot of that to pay their soldiers was really bounty from exploits and what could you get. And he basically just retired back to Mount Vernon. Most generals, most men in history would have taken this opportunity. As a matter of fact, the Britons thought that he was going to be King George. King George of the Americas. But that wasn't to be. Because George Washington was just an average guy. He was an average colonel. He owned slaves, yes. But he did treat them with respect. That was the culture. Just like it is in the culture today. We have modern slavery. It's in every one of our cities right now. We have many people that are in slavery that don't even know it. George Washington, though, went back Mount Vernon, and that was it. But then in a couple of years, the people came back to him and said, would you be our first president? Would you take the mantle and guide our country? And that was the formation of the United States of America. The United States of America. What is our destiny over the next 100 years? Who knows? Who knows? Will we survive the next 100 years? Who knows? Who knows? Does liberty triumph over evil, over tyranny? Well, that's interesting because in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, it's interesting on the second page of this little document, there's an interesting phrase here. Now I'm walking, so I'm going to stop for a second. I want to read this and I don't have my reading glasses, so give me a break. It says, according to experience has shown that mankind are always disposed to suffer. Are always disposed to suffer, while evil are sufferable, than the right themselves to abolish the forms to which they are accustomed. Do you hear that? Mankind are always disposed to suffer. I'm telling you, these guys, when they wrote this book, man is disposed to evil. But it takes good people to stand up for the righteous. And you have to have a moral code. See, this document right here that I just read is useless unless you have a God behind it. It's useless. It's just paper. It's just a piece of paper. You have to have a moral code in which to enforce it. If you don't have any moral code, you have no document. It's just words. And that's what the soldiers at Valley Forge were wondering. It's the dead of winter. George Washington is perplexed. He knows that he might lose half his army in the spring. And he writes a document. I don't know, I don't have it with me and I completely forget about it. But he writes this letter to all of his soldiers as an encouragement, because it was bleak, guys. It was bleak. It was really bleak. Sometimes we think it's bleak. Sometimes we think that it just doesn't seem to change. Here you got this morning the fog. You got the fog. It's covering the soybeans. You've got another day coming. You have another day. And the soldiers were Continental Army sitting there, and they're shivering. They don't have any video games to watch or to do. They just had their tobacco. They're in their huts trying to keep warm all winter long. The stench must have been amazing. They're just trying to get through the winter. Just trying to get through the winter. And then things changed. They came out of it. George Washington had secured the army. And Valley Forge is a date that goes into history. The Battle of Peleliu goes down in history. The Battle of Bulge goes down in history. D-Day goes down in history. The Doughboys in World War I go down in history. Sherman's March goes down in history. Aspect. So nearly 30 years later, 20 years later, you got 1812. The British had landed in Washington. They burned the White House, but then something mysteriously happened. All of a sudden, a hurricane hits. At the exact same time, the British are in Washington, and they're driven out of Washington because of the hurricane. Some people think it's divine. It was a miracle. It was the hand of God. Who knows? But what I find odd is the Battle of New Orleans. So the war was over. The war was over in England and Washington. They'd got a peace treaty. But you know what? They didn't have the Morse code. They didn't have a telegram. Da-da-da-da-da-da. No, all they had was horses and boats. Now, how long do you think it takes to get from Washington, D.C.? Well, England to Washington was a couple months on the sea. You had to hope for calm. And then from Washington to St. Louis or New Orleans. Well, the Battle of New Orleans was just going to begin. And it was fought. Andrew Jackson defeated the British. And then they got word the war is over. The war had been over for weeks, months. But they didn't know. They didn't. Sorry about that. Reconnect. Sorry, reconnect. Reconnect. So June, I talked about this a couple months, last month, June 6th, 1944. We landed in Germany. June 44. And the war was over in less than a year. The sheer amount of force that had landed couldn't stop it. All the nicknames, the veracity of Americans. But we weren't just Americans. We were British, we were French, we were Italian Americans. We were all races. But we were endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Freedom. freedom. And that is key. That's what we fought for in 1776, in 1812, in 60, in 1918, in 1940, 1948, 1960s with Vietnam, 1990 in the Persian Gulf. A righteous man prevaileth much. A righteous man. George Washington was that man. They can say all they want about him. They would love to tear him down. And that's how you destroy a country, is you tear your founders down. And that's what they've been doing for the last 30 years. Well, probably since 1960, they've been tearing down our country, tearing down our people, tearing down our founding fathers, tearing down. All they know how to do is tear down. We have to stand up, because here's something else that's important that people never want to talk about. And this is probably the most important part of this document, more than probably any part of the document. It says, governments are instituted by men, derived their powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute a new government laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers from such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. It is our right. No other document has that right in it. No other government has that, or document in the world. We have the right. If this government becomes too punitive, which it is right now, I'm telling you, what started the American Revolutionary War? Well, you know what? You go back to the second page, and I'll tell you what. It says right here. And this is the Constitution talking about King George. The history of the present King of Great Britain, in the history of repeated injuries and impressions, I have all having indirect object to establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. He has refused to assess to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden the governors to pass laws of intermediance and pressing importance unless substituted in their operations till his absence should be obtained. He has refused to pass other laws for the abolishment of large districts of people. He's basically King George hasn't done anything for the Americas. It was kind of a lawless state. And there's a whole list of grievances that they list. And but we have to remember, we the people defeated the British Empire. America's no different. We have Washington, but that's nothing compared to the people. It's nothing really compared to the people. Because the army is really the people. It's we the people. Your militias, your National Guard, it's people. It's regular people. And what did Great Britain do? They taxed the tea. They taxed the tea. They taxed the tea. The Boston Tea Party. A simple little event that sparked a civil war between Britain and America, the colonies. Isn't it amazing? The hardening of hearts, just like Pharaoh's heart was hardened. If he just had let, what did Moses kept saying? Let our people go into the wilderness for 3 days and let us worship. That's all he was asking for. America's just wanted to be governed correctly. But King George just didn't want to do it. His heart was hardened. That's what I find amazing is what would have happened if he hadn't have hardened his heart and he allowed the British colonies to have their own governing. Now, would that have left to a United States later? Who knows? But it would have sure pushed back by hundreds of years our technology and our way of life right now. That's for sure. But 1776 was that pivotal. That's the word. The word is pivotal moment in history. Okay, which changed everything, guys. It changed everything. It changed everything. And you all have that pivotal moment in your life. You all have that pivotal time in your life. You all have that pivotal moment that defines who you are. Some people have it early in life, some people have it later in life. I frankly have had it several times. But we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. And the fact of the matter is that very few Americans back in the Continental Army or in the Continental 1770s really wanted to go to war with Britain. There were a lot of patriots that didn't want to go against King George. There were a lot. But there were a lot that wanted to succeed. And that's why you had Philadelphia, Independence Square, the Liberty Bell, all the little things that make America. It's amazing how Hollywood has changed from the early on. You had all these patriots back in the 30s and the 20s that were 30s and 40s that really made a lot of patriotic movies because, you know, a lot of them were immigrants to themselves, and they were proud of America. They were proud of what it had become as our men went to war in World War II, as millions of Americans flooded into the Liberty ships with hopes and dreams. They did not know what was going to happen. They didn't know if they were going to come home or not. I tell a story about Mac, my stepfather. He joins the Marines, trains, sent into the Pacific, gets injured, a bullet shot through his shoulder, comes out his chest. He survives. Purple Heart, comes back to Ohio, gets married. Works for Postal, marries my mom, becomes my stepdad, lives until 96. Lives till 96. Nice man. The lives and liberties of all of our fathers and mothers, the hopes and dreams were forged back in Valley Forge of 1776, when those signers of the Declaration of Independence put their death signatures on that document. And knew that when they put their signature on that document, they were signing their death warrant. There's the corn, how it's grown in just 1 week. Understanding what God has done, understanding what God will do, understanding what God will be, understanding how God will direct, understanding how God has divinely inspired our nation. We must not forget what He has done for this nation. If we do, we will pay a heavy cost. We must never forget the sacrifice that have gone before us. There is only one flag, and that's the Stars and Stripe. A unique, it's the bombs bursting in air gave truth to our light that the flag was still there. All night long, Payne is sitting on this ship, British ship, and they're bombarding that fort all night long. And in the morning, after all the smoke had cleared away, the flag was still standing. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what a moment in history that must have been. But people, all they want to do is oh, well, there we go. All right, we've got both connections back. Dawn light. Bombs bursting in air gave truth to our light that the flag was still there. You can't make this up. You can't make those words up. You can't make up how that changed history forever. It was only a matter of time. In less than 200 years, we landed on the moon. 1969. What flag was posted on the moon? The United States flag. What was the first airplane that flew across the ocean? Lindbergh and the Spirit of St. Louis. What was the first light bulb? Thomas Edison, after 900 tries. It's going to be a hot day today. July 4th, it's going to be a hot one. It's going to be a hot day today. It's going to be a hot day today. Yep. I just want people to understand that it's not the wicked that we have to worry about. It's the righteous. It's people that know different and they need to stand. That's really what needs to change. We're just one nation. We're just a nation that has many people, many religions, many we, you know, it's kind of like a farmer, one of these frontiermen. He packs his wife and children into a wagon. There's no medical doctors. There's nothing. There's just him and his wife and his children. Depends on how many children you have. And they set out to the west. He might lose a children, then he'll have another one. He gets to the place where he wants to be. Doesn't have any animosity toward anybody. He's got one of his Bibles with him. He's a moral man. He just wants to raise his family on his farm. He finds a piece of land in a valley. He plots out his house. He builds his log cabin. He catches fur or whatever he can to trade. He's just trying to create a family. And he acknowledges his God. That's what it's all about. No government, nothing. No government, no oppressive thumb telling him he can't do this or can't do that. That's where we're at, really. That's where we're at in this world. And one thing's certain for sure. There's nothing new under the sun, I've always said. There's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new under the sun. What has been, will be, will come. Nothing changes. Nothing. Every time you go to bed, you thank God for all that He's done for you. Thank you for the family that I have, the life that you've provided, the food that you provide, the job that you've given me. Help me to love my brother as myself, love the Lord with all my heart. And you will be a fulfilled man or woman. You will be content in what He has done for you. That's what has been missing a lot lately. We've missed a lot of it. And understanding what He is going to do for us is very important. Never forget. Two new families are coming into Wayne. One family, I think, has 3 children. The other one has 5. That's new breath in life in Wayne. It's families wanting to grow and to have a family and to raise them and to see what their direction is going to be. It's important that we raise our children and do what is right. Well, I'm coming to an end to my talk. I hope everyone got something from this message. I'm not a poet. I'm not a philosopher. I just sometimes have things to say. I have a different way. I have a different perspective from a lot of people. And it's going gonna be a hot day today, I think. Oh God. Oh, okay, that felt better. Well, let's see here. How can I get both all right, both cameras are in focus. Let me close in a word of prayer. Dear Lord, we want to thank you for all that you've provided for us. We thank you for your majesty and your grace and your mercy. We pray that you would guide and direct us, each one of us, our families, that you would guide and direct us into the ways of righteousness, that we would raise our children according to your will, Lord, and your direction. We pray for our country, that you would guide and direct it into the right direction. Give us strength and mercy. Give us wisdom and peace, that we may understand you more closely. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Well, I hope everybody has a good 4th of July. This is my beginning of the 4th of July. We're going to go to an island. Daniel's friend has this island, and we're going to spend the day there, I think. Something different. Something different. I thank everybody that's watching both my live streams. We had a good turnout on Facebook, and we have a good turnout on YouTube. Both of them are doing well, and I hope you all have a great day. Goodbye.